You don't expect your life to change because of a coin, but the moment I saw it lying there, rusted, glinting under the grey sky, I knew something was wrong. I hadn't been back in Asheville for more than a week, and already the past was clawing its way out of the ground. It was the same coin Rachel and I had thrown into the river 3 years ago, right before I deployed. "For love," she'd whispered, gripping my hand like she meant it. "Heads, we make it. Tails, we don't. We never checked which side landed up. We called it fate, and kissed like that could keep the world from pulling us apart." I found the coin on the riverbank, not in the water, not buried in the mud, placed, like someone wanted me to see it. I should have walked away, should have taken it as a stupid coincidence. But something in me stirred, the kind of chill you feel not from cold, but from knowing. Rachel hadn't answered my call since I landed. I'd let it slide, figured she was overwhelmed or maybe needed time, but after the coin, I drove straight to her place. That's when everything shattered. She opened the door, surprised, not joyful, not emotional, just caught. Behind her, in the living room, stood Matt, my oldest friend, my brother in all but blood, and he wasn't just visiting. His hand was on the back of her neck like he belonged there. "Alex," Rachel said, voice flat. "I called," I said. "I know." Matt didn't speak. He just watched me like I was the one intruding, and maybe I was. The pictures on the wall told their own story. A timeline of stolen years, holidays, dinners, vacations. All the moments I missed while dodging shrapnel and holding my squad together. My place in Rachel's life had been replaced, quietly, efficiently. I turned and walked away without a word. But the real betrayal came 2 days later. A letter arrived from the Department of Veterans Affairs. A notification confirming that Rachel, as my listed emergency contact, had accepted the service compensation on my behalf. Signed, deposited weeks ago. I stood in the kitchen of the rental house I barely remembered renting, the paper trembling in my hand. I hadn't even known the payout had gone through. That was when the flashbacks stopped being about gunfire and started being about them. I dug. I looked through bank records, made calls, found out Rachel and Matt had opened a joint account a month before I even landed back in the States. The dots connected fast. Rachel never planned to wait, Matt never planned to stay loyal, and both had planned for my return. They just didn't think I'd ask questions. I felt like a ghost in my own story. I could have gone to the police, but it wasn't criminal on paper. The VA had accepted her ID. My power of attorney, left behind like a fool in a hurry, gave her legal access. But what they did, how they timed it, how they smiled through it, wasn't just betrayal, it was strategy. And then came the voicemail, from Matt, like he was doing me a favor. "Alex, man, I know this looks bad, but you've been gone a long time. Things change, you deserve to move on." No apology, no guilt, just instructions to forget. The audacity made me laugh, the kind of laugh that feels like a scream held behind teeth. I didn't respond. I started writing instead, documenting everything, every date, every transaction, every absence. Because silence is what they counted on. What they didn't count on was me still being alive, still thinking, still remembering. The next time I saw Rachel was at the grocery store. She pushed a cart filled with wine and paper plates, looked like she was throwing a party. "Alex," she said again, like her voice hadn't already hollowed out my trust. "Tell me something," I asked. "Was it worth it? The money, the lies? Sleeping next to someone who always wanted what I had?" Her eyes darted. Not guilty, defensive. "You were gone for 2 years. I thought..." "You thought wrong." She didn't follow. She didn't call. But later that night, someone slid an envelope under my door. No name. Just a note scribbled in unfamiliar handwriting. "It wasn't supposed to be you. He said you wouldn't come back." I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I opened the envelope. Inside was a photo. Me and Matt, 5 years ago, Arm in arm at a 4th of July cookout. Behind us, Rachel looking at Matt, not me. The next morning, I flipped the coin again. Heads, not for fate, for choice. They had taken something from me, but I still had my name, my hands, and the truth. And I wasn't letting it go this time. You learn a lot about people when you stop telling them what you know. For 2 weeks, I stayed quiet. Let them believe I was broken, defeated, ready to disappear like a good little war ghost. I didn't confront them, didn't call. I wanted to see how far they'd take it. Matt applied for a mortgage in both their names, using my military bonus as combined household income. Rachel updated her social media, starting fresh with someone who understands stability. They weren't just moving on, they were rewriting history, with me cut from the frame. So I did the only thing they never expected. I asked for help. Her name was Elise. She ran a community legal initiative for veterans and handled fraud cases that technically weren't fraud. I told her everything: dates, signatures, the timeline. She didn't blink. You signed a general POA before deployment? Yes. You trusted her? Yes. She nodded, then leaned back and said, "That was your only mistake." Elise didn't make promises, she made plans. While the law didn't favor me on paper, she knew how to poke holes in the image they built. They used your absence as an asset. That matters more than you think, especially if they did it while publicly acting like you were still together. Turns out Rachel had posted weekly updates during my deployment, asked for donations for care packages, called me my hero overseas, all while dating Matt behind the scenes. That's when Elise smiled for the first time. That's emotional fraud with public misrepresentation. Let's make them explain it. We didn't sue, not yet. That would have taken months. But Elise crafted a formal claim to the VA requesting an internal audit of disbursement based on potential beneficiary misrepresentation. She filed a civil injunction to freeze their joint account pending review, and then we let the system work. Rachel's first response came through a voicemail again, tearful this time. "Alex, I didn't mean for it to go this far. I was scared. We didn't know if you'd come back. Please don't ruin my life over this." But I didn't ruin anything. She made the choices. I just brought a flashlight. Then the pressure cracked the mask. Matt showed up at my place, unannounced. Same grin he used back in high school when he crashed my truck and blamed the brakes. "Look, man, this is going too far. You're making a scene." "No," I said. "I'm making a record." "You think the VA's going to side with you?" "I think the VA's going to ask why a man with no active service used his deployed friend's bank access to fund a down payment." He laughed, too loud. "You've changed." "No," I said. "I've just stopped pretending you didn't." He left with a slammed door and silence. But silence doesn't mean safety. 2 days later, someone keyed my car. Then came the anonymous messages. "Watch yourself." "You're lucky you came back at all." "Leave it alone." I didn't show Elise the worst ones, but I sent them to a cyber unit that worked with her firm. The IPs traced back to Matt's cousin, Sloppy. By week 3, the VA audit triggered a local inquiry. A journalist named Carter reached out. He'd been following Rachel's fundraising posts during my deployment. "Want to go on record?" he asked. "No." "But you are the story." "I'm the evidence," I replied. "The story is how easily it can happen to anyone." He published it anyway, not my name, but the structure. A returning vet, a power of attorney abused, a relationship built on performance. It wasn't just my life anymore. Dozens of similar messages poured into Carter's inbox. Other veterans, other betrayals. The headline read, "Love letters and legal loopholes when absence becomes opportunity." It hit local radio next, then a podcast, and finally someone tagged Rachel. That's when the apology post arrived, long scripted, full of phrases like trauma response, navigating difficult emotions, and respecting all sides. But nowhere in there was sorry, just spin. So I posted my own version. No names, no accusations, just a photo of the coin and the caption. Heads, we make it. Tails, we lie. Some people flip both sides and call it fate. It went viral by morning. Rachel deactivated. Matt lawyered up. But not before someone leaked texts, screenshots of him bragging about securing the bag while I was busy playing G.I. Joe. My lawyer smiled when she saw it. "We don't even need court," she said. "They've already convicted themselves publicly. And yet, the hardest part wasn't legal, it was personal." I visited my old squad leader, now running a mechanic shop out of town. I told him the story. He listened without blinking, then said, "You didn't come back for revenge, you came back to remember who you were." He was right. This wasn't about rage anymore, it was about reclamation. I didn't want Rachel back, or Matt gone. I wanted my story untwisted. I wanted to know that my name still meant something, even after others had used it like a stepping stone. Last week, I held a workshop at a local resource centre. Topic: Trust, Trauma and the Paper Trail. Half the room was filled with veterans. The other half, civilians who'd never thought twice about who they listed as emergency contacts. One guy asked me after, "Do you forgive them?" I thought for a moment, then said, "I don't carry them anymore, that's enough." I thought the storm had passed, but silence, I've learned, isn't peace, it's prep. A kind of artificial stillness that waits for your guard to drop. 3 weeks after the article dropped, I got a letter. Not from Rachel, not from Matt, from a law firm. High-end, full of polished names and watermarked paper. The letter accused me of defamation, emotional harm, and reckless dissemination of private matters. They claimed I orchestrated a smear campaign, that I weaponized my experience for public sympathy. I sat on the bench outside Elise's office, letter in hand, watching traffic roll past, like it didn't care that my life had just been dragged into a courtroom without a gavel. Elise took one look and smiled faintly. Classic scare tactic. They're testing your fear threshold. I didn't speak. I just stared at the name on the letterhead. Harrington and Doyle, Vera Harrington's firm, Matt's new employer, Rachel's new network. So that's how they were playing it. Not with apologies, with escalation. What followed was a different kind of battle. Not loud, not physical, just layers of paperwork and meetings where every sentence was a trap and every truth had to be proven. Matt filed a motion to cease and desist all digital activity referencing a personal matter under legal review. Rachel attached a statement about emotional distress triggered by online harassment. Neither mentioned my name directly, they didn't have to. The court of public opinion wasn't on their side, but real court doesn't care about comment sections. Elise filed a counterclaim, abuse of process. She argued that their suit was a retaliatory action meant to intimidate, not protect. We submitted everything, screenshots, timelines, even a log of the anonymous messages I'd received. Most importantly, we filed a request to depose both of them under oath. That's when the tone changed. First came the silence. Then Rachel reached out directly, an email. Subject: "Let's not make this worse." She wrote about how we had loved once, how things got confused, how public exposure was hurting innocent people. But her idea of innocent didn't include the man they robbed of more than money. It didn't include me. I didn't respond, but I did get smarter. At the next hearing, Elise dropped something on the judge's desk that silenced the room. A digital audit from the fundraising campaign Rachel ran during my deployment. She hadn't just asked for supplies, she had created a GoFundMe-style campaign under the label Support My Deployed Hero, using old photos of me, and collected over $12,000. Not one transaction went to veteran support, not one receipt. And that money, it had gone into the same joint account she opened with Matt. The account that funded their down payment. The judge didn't speak immediately, but I watched his fingers tap once, twice on the table, like he was measuring consequences. Outside the courthouse, reporters had started gathering. The original journalist Carter was there too, notepad tucked under his arm, phone already recording. He didn't ask for quotes, he just nodded at me and said, "They thought they could bury this?" I shook my head. They thought I'd stay quiet. He smiled, and I realized he wasn't there for the story anymore. He was there to finish something he believed in. The next blow didn't come in court, it came online. A woman reached out to Elise anonymously. She claimed to be Matt's ex from college, said she had seen the article and recognized the behavior. She forwarded messages. Voice recordings. One where Matt bragged about learning how to build loyalty by making people doubt themselves. Another where he joked about finding another Rachel if this one melts. It wasn't admissible in court, but it was enough for the internet. The recordings leaked. Within days, Rachel's professional pages were down. Matt's law firm put him on indefinite leave, a quiet PR phrase for get out until people forget your name. And yet, this wasn't about vengeance anymore. It was about removing their grip from the throat of truth. One night, I stood in the hallway of the community centre after another veterans workshop. A young guy, maybe 25, pulled me aside. "Saw your story," he said. "My girl tried to pull something similar. I thought I was losing my mind. Then I realised it wasn't me." He smiled, but his eyes were sharp. Focused. "Thanks," he said, "for not shutting up." The final hearing didn't go viral. There were no cameras, just paperwork, signatures, agreements. Rachel withdrew her claim, so did Matt. The judge issued a protective order for me, and the account they built off my service was seized and closed. Elise called it a quiet win. I called it survival. Months later, I visited the river again, the same spot where I found the coin. I stood there for a long time, the water moving slow but steady, like time was bleeding the poison out of everything. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a new coin, unmarked, clean, no heads, no tails, just a circle, no fate this time, no gamble. I let it go. It disappeared into the current. People think survival ends with the verdict, the dropped lawsuit, the apology post, the cleared account, but it doesn't. Survival doesn't end. It shifts. You carry it in the way you check every message twice, in the way your hand hovers before signing anything, in the way trust feels like a door that doesn't shut all the way anymore. 3 months passed. The town moved on. Rachel's name stopped trending. Matt's career quietly collapsed. His firm never issued a public statement, just scrubbed his profile and promoted someone else. Rachel moved out of the city, according to someone at the bank. No forwarding address, no closure, just absence. But I stayed. Not to hold on, to rebuild. I wasn't interested in winning anymore. I was interested in what could be built from all the pieces left behind. It started with a message from Elise. Vet Centre in South Point wants a speaker for their transition program. I gave them your name. My first instinct was no. I wasn't a speaker. I was just a guy who got burned and didn't fold. But something about it felt necessary. Not for them, for me. The first time I stood in front of that room, I didn't rehearse. I told the story straight, what I signed, what I missed, what I assumed love looked like, what betrayal actually felt like, and then I told them what came after. Not revenge, not rage, just resistance. By the end, no one clapped, but no one moved either. Then a guy near the back raised his hand. "What would you do different?" I didn't blink. Read the fine print and don't hand your future to someone who only loves you in absence. He nodded. No more questions. Word spread faster than I expected. The centre invited me back. Other cities called. Elise connected me to an organisation tracking emotional and financial abuse within military families. They had data. Statistics, not case studies. What they didn't have was someone who'd stood in the wreckage and walked out with receipts. I joined their advocacy panel. I wasn't there to rage, I was there to testify. And every time I stood in front of those crowds, I made one thing clear. The damage wasn't just betrayal, it was the silence expected after. That's where the real rot lived. Then something unexpected happened. A woman reached out after one of my talks, said her brother went through something similar but never told anyone, said he thought no one would believe a man could be manipulated like that. He drank himself quiet, she whispered. I wish he'd heard you speak. That night, I couldn't sleep, because I knew how close I'd come to shutting down too. If I hadn't found that coin, if I hadn't gone to Rachel's door, if I hadn't chosen confrontation over collapse, I started building a resource page, quietly, without fanfare, just a place online for men to submit questions anonymously. Legal templates, where to find help, what a power of attorney actually gives someone, what emotional manipulation can look like when it hides behind smiles and good intentions. People came, not thousands, but enough. Men who said they'd never told anyone, who thought they were just weak or overreacting. And I read every word they wrote like it mattered, because it did. One night, after hosting a panel in Atlanta, a guy pulled me aside in the parking lot, mid-30s, clean-cut, corporate type. You know what got me? He said. That you didn't try to look tough. You looked pissed off, yeah, but not untouchable. It made me believe I didn't have to pretend either. I nodded, didn't say much, didn't need to. That's when I realized strength wasn't never breaking, it was refusing to disappear when you did. Months later, I walked past the old riverbank again, just passing through. The water was high from spring rain, the coin was long gone, but I wasn't looking for it. What I noticed instead was a kid, maybe 10, standing near the water's edge. He looked like he wanted to throw something but couldn't let it go. I stopped, keeping my distance. You okay? He shrugged, then held out a small rock. It's for someone who left, he said. You waiting for them to come back? He nodded. I knelt a few feet away. Can I tell you something? He looked at me. Sometimes they don't come back, but you can still tell the river, it listens. He stared at the water, then tossed the rock with all his strength. It skipped once, then sank. He didn't say goodbye. He just stood there a moment longer, then walked off without looking back. I never knew his name, but that moment stayed, because in a world that tells men to hold it in, to tough it out, to stay silent, sometimes all it takes is being seen. So no, this story didn't end with a punchline or a headline or a perfect wrap-up. It ended with a choice. I didn't get the money back. I didn't get justice in the traditional sense, but I got my name back, my story, and now other people have theirs too. That's more than enough. The first time I heard someone call it a legacy, I froze. It wasn't about medals or war stories. It wasn't about honor either. A woman, mid-40s, sharp voice, no nonsense, stood up during a seminar in Dallas and said, "You're building a legacy whether you want to or not. Question is, what kind?" The room was quiet after that. I didn't answer her directly, but the question stuck like a stone in my pocket. Because I'd spent so long tearing things down, lies, silence, reputations, I hadn't thought about what I was building in their place. 3 weeks later, I met Logan. He was 19, still had that raw edge of someone who hadn't learned yet to hide what he felt. He came up after one of the sessions, said his dad was military, said his mum left years ago, and said, "I want to be like you." I told him no, don't be like me. Be louder, be earlier, be unwilling to let pain grow legs. But he kept coming back, sat through every session, asked questions that cut through the surface. Then one day he said, "You ever think about mentoring?" I hadn't. I was barely holding together my own sense of direction, but I said yes. Not because I felt ready, but because I remembered what it felt like not having anyone say yes when it mattered. Mentorship turned into movement. By summer, Elise had helped set up a non-profit branch, Second Draft, focused on legal and emotional advocacy for men recovering from financial betrayal, relational abuse, and manipulation during military or medical service. not just veterans. Anyone who got left behind while someone else wrote their story. We started with 5 people, then 10. Then it grew without asking permission. One guy donated free accounting services. Another offered trauma-informed counseling. I brought the receipts, the scars, the voice. And slowly, people started listening, not because it was dramatic, but because it was true. Then Rachel came back into the picture, not in person, through a podcast. She was a guest on a show about navigating complex grief, telling her version, polished, soft-spoken, full of terms like emotional displacement, co-survivorship, and difficult truths. I listened alone, one earbud in, half expecting a name drop. She never said mine, but I was there between every line. It wasn't lies, it was curation. She painted herself as someone swept up in confusion. She spoke of decisions made in uncertainty and how everyone copes differently. The host ate it up, but she said something near the end that chilled me. I don't think people should be punished forever for moments when they weren't their best selves. It wasn't wrong, but it was hollow, because legacy doesn't care about your intentions. It counts what you leave behind. And she'd left behind silence, scorched trust, and a child's version of honesty. 2 weeks after the episode aired, I got a message from a woman I didn't know, said she'd listened, said something in her gut felt off, said she found our resource site, said her brother had died by suicide last year after being financially isolated during cancer treatment by a partner who handled all the bills, said no one believed it mattered until now. She ended her message with, "Thank you for proving we're not crazy, just quiet." That's when I stopped caring about reputation, not mine, not hers, not theirs, because reputation is fragile. It breaks when handled. Legacy, it grows when carried. We printed pamphlets, we did interviews. Elise started working with lawmakers on reform around POA oversight and consent-based financial guardianship. Quiet work. No headlines, but it moved. We weren't building a brand, we were building friction against the lie that silence is safer. One day, I took Logan with me to speak at a juvenile centre. The kids were rough, not disrespectful, just hardened. You could see in their eyes they'd already been written off. Some didn't look up once. I didn't tell them what I'd lost, I told them what I learned. That trust isn't free, that silence is a language, and if you don't translate it, someone else will. That the first time you hand your future to someone else without reading the fine print, you've already started writing your own erasure. By the end, one kid raised his hand and asked, "So what now?" I said, "Now you stop letting broken people edit your future." Months passed, the story faded, but the echo stayed. Sometimes I'd get tagged in a tweet or receive a photo from another centre with 5 men standing in front of a whiteboard that read, "We take our names back." Rachel, I haven't seen her, don't plan to. Matt, last I heard he was living out west, freelancing, no firm would take him on. Me, I work, I write, I speak when asked, I keep my head down unless someone else needs theirs lifted. And every now and then I go back to the river, not to look for the coin, that chapter's closed, but to remind myself that the most dangerous kind of betrayal isn't the kind that screams. It's the one that smiles, signs the paper, and asks you to move on. And the only answer I have left for that is no, not anymore. There's a kind of quiet that doesn't ache anymore. It's not numbness, it's not peace either. It's something in between, a space where the pain stops defining you, but the memory doesn't leave. That's where I live now. 6 months have passed since the last time I said Rachel's name out loud, not because I'm avoiding it, but because there's nothing left to explain. Some stories lose weight the more you tell them, others become anchors. I've learned to let this one drift, but not everything disappeared. The organisation, Second Draft, grew into something I didn't plan. We have volunteers in 4 states now, a small legal team, counsellors, survivors who now run the very programmes they once called anonymously. We don't advertise, we don't market. People just find us when they need us most. And I found a role I never wanted, staying, not as a leader, not even as a symbol, just as someone who didn't run. The letters still come. I keep most of them in a locked drawer. Some are long, pages of raw grief. Others are one line. You told my story before I could. I don't always know how to respond, but I read every word. I owe them that. I owe myself that too, because I remember how it felt to open your mouth and have no language for what was done to you, when everything sounds petty or bitter or weak, when the world only sees abuse through fists and bruises and misses the quieter ways someone can make you disappear. I met someone recently, not romantically, just human. Her name's Dana. She runs a shelter for men who've lost custody of their kids and homes during drawn-out legal fights. She's sharp, not gentle, but honest in a way that cuts clean. We ended up talking one night after a panel. "You're not angry anymore," she said. "I'm tired," I replied. "That's different." "Is it?" She nodded. Anger moves things, but exhaustion tells you what's worth lifting again. That stuck. I don't carry the coin anymore. I gave it to a young guy after a workshop in Ohio. He asked what it meant. I told him, "It used to be a symbol, now it's just a reminder. Never let anyone else decide what side of the story you're on." He kept it. I don't need it now. Logan's starting his own project, outreach to college students signing joint leases or co-signing on cars without understanding the risks. He calls it Before You Sign. Smart kid. Smarter than I was. He asked me to review his first presentation. Halfway through, I saw a slide titled, "Erasure Isn't Always Obvious." I stopped him there. "You wrote this?" He nodded. "That line's going to stay with people," I said. He smiled. "It stayed with me first." I get invitations now, podcasts, panels, interviews. Most of them go unanswered. I don't need a platform. I need proximity to people who haven't found the words yet. But I did say yes to one, a podcast about recovery, hosted by a therapist who used to work in family court, not flashy, just real. She asked one question that mattered. "What do you think justice looks like?" I didn't pause. "It's not getting back what was taken," I said. "It's knowing you were right to fight." She nodded, said nothing. Just let the silence carry the weight it needed to. Sometimes I visit Elise's office just to sit. She pretends it's because I need to sign something. We both know it's not. One afternoon, she handed me a folder with notes from a recent legislative session. Reforms on POA abuse had made it through state committee review. Slow progress, but it was moving. "This started because you told the truth," she said. "No," I said. "It started because someone tried to erase it." She smiled. That kind that doesn't reach her mouth but holds something firm beneath it. Same thing, really. I don't have a checklist for closure. I didn't burn her photos or throw things off bridges. I didn't get revenge. I got clarity. Rachel never apologized. Not directly, not personally, but she vanished. And that's sometimes the closest thing to an admission some people are capable of. Matt's name occasionally pops up in online discussions about workplace ethics, a ghost in other people's red flags. He became a cautionary tale, not a villain. Fine by me, because my goal was never to ruin them. It was to outlive what they did. And I did. I teach one rule now, always the same. When someone rewrites your name, write it back, louder, not to punish, to remember, because memory is how we survive silence, and story is how we stop it from happening again. So this is what my legacy looks like now. Not courtroom drama, not scandal. A hotline that doesn't go to voicemail, a letter that gets read, a teenager who asks questions early, a man who tells his truth before it eats him alive. And every so often, a message from someone I'll never meet that simply says, "I thought I was the only one." That quiet, it's no longer fear. It's the space where something true can finally be heard. Not everything gets posted. Not every win comes with a spotlight. Some of the most important moments in this story happened when no one was watching, when no one clapped, shared, or even noticed. But that's where the real weight sits. It's not about the public parts anymore, not about vindication or visibility. It's about what you do after the noise dies down, when there's no audience, just the choice to keep showing up. A few months ago, I got a message from an old friend. We hadn't talked in years. He'd been at my deployment send-off, disappeared after that, like most people do when they don't know what to say. "I've been following your story," he wrote. "My brother's going through something similar. I didn't know how to help until I saw what you built." He didn't ask for advice, he just needed to say it. Needed to be part of something that didn't ignore what men usually swallow and bury. That message stayed with me longer than most because it wasn't flashy, it wasn't desperate, it was honest, and that's rarer than people think. Second draft kept growing, but not fast, not viral, just steady. One story turned into another. One man gave another man permission to speak. We held our first in-person retreat that spring, a dozen of us in a borrowed meeting hall. No program, no press, just coffee, folding chairs, and a long whiteboard with the words, "What did they take?" The room stayed quiet for a while. Then someone said, "Time." Another said, "Trust." Someone else added, "My voice." By the end of the day, the board was full, but none of the men looked smaller, just clearer. Because saying it out loud doesn't make you weak, it makes the silence weaker. That summer, I met Ruben. He was 53, divorced, lost custody of his son after a long legal fight that left him with nothing but a suitcase and a half-finished truck project. He didn't say much during sessions, just listened, wrote in a small notebook. One evening, he waited until the parking lot emptied and then walked over to me. "I've been angry for 10 years, he said, "but it never got me anywhere. Watching you, it made me wonder if I could turn it into something else." He didn't need a lecture, just a witness. We sat on the curb and talked until it got dark. 3 weeks later, he launched a program teaching basic mechanics to boys in group homes. No budget, no website, just tools and time. He called it Rebuild. Said he was done waiting to feel healed before helping someone else. That's legacy too. People always ask if I've moved on. They think healing is linear, that there's some point where the anger evaporates and everything becomes perspective. It doesn't. Some days are light, others carry old echoes. But I've stopped treating that as a problem. I tell new members the truth. You might always feel a small fracture inside you, but it won't always hurt. That matters more than pretending I'm fine. One night, Logan asked me a hard question. If you could go back before all of it, would you still love her? I didn't answer right away. He didn't push. He just let the question sit. And eventually I said, "I loved who I thought she was. That version doesn't exist anymore. Maybe it never did." He nodded, then said, "That's still real though, right? Even if she wasn't." "Yeah," I said. "It was real for me. That's enough." We talk a lot about betrayal, not enough about detachment. The slow process of giving yourself permission to stop replaying the story, to let people be who they are, even if that person destroyed something you once believed in. Elise sent me a message recently. A state senator had referenced our nonprofit by name during a public discussion about family court reform. The room didn't erupt, there wasn't applause, but it was on record. And that meant it was now part of the system that once ignored us. I texted back, "Quiet wins are still wins," she replied, "the only kind that last." Rachel hasn't reached out again. I don't expect her to. I saw a tagged post recently, her photo at a panel on resilience. Same soft language, same public poise. I didn't feel anything, not anger, not relief, just distance. Sometimes survival looks like forgetting what someone's voice sounds like. Matt resurfaced briefly online, launching a side project about ethical entrepreneurship. A few people from our community called it out. I told them to let it be. We don't chase ghosts here. We build for the living. The last story I'll tell isn't mine. It's from a guy named Malik Young. Quiet. Brilliant. He came to our retreat with a folder of poems he'd never read aloud. One afternoon, he stood up and said, "They said I was overreacting, that it was just a breakup, but they didn't see what it cost me to stop trusting my own instincts." Then he read a line I still remember. "You didn't ruin me. You taught me how fast hands can turn into walls. I broke through anyway." That line belongs in a book or on a wall, but for now it just lives in us. Passed hand to hand. A reminder. This is what the quiet looks like now. No rage, no courtrooms, no press, just presence, consistency, men who stay, men who speak, men who protect each other in a world that never taught them how. When no one's watching, we still show up, and that's where the next chapter begins.